Okay, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling tokenization. We've got a whole stack of articles on this, and let me tell you, it seems like everyone's talking about it, from MasterCard to Wall Street.
It really is fascinating to see. It's like this fusion of classic finance and cutting-edge technology, and it's clearly not just some passing trend. This is going mainstream.
Totally. So, for anyone new to this whole thing,
Yeah.
what is tokenization exactly? One article explained it as basically swapping out sensitive data, like, say, your credit card info, for these digital tokens.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're at a casino. You wouldn't walk around flashing a wad of cash, right?
hmm
You trade your money for chips, and those chips represent value. Tokens work in a similar way, representing your sensitive data in the digital realm.
Okay, so kind of like a digital poker chip that only really means something within that specific casino.
Exactly. That's the genius of it. Even if someone gets a hold of the token, it's useless to them because they can't actually get to the underlying data. It adds this whole extra layer of security.
No wonder MasterCard's jumping in headfirst. One article said they're clocking 1 billion tokenized transactions every week. 1 billion. What's driving that kind of volume?
It really shows how fast this technology is catching on. MasterCard is pushing it for things like safer online shopping, even replacing passwords with things like, biometrics. But it's bigger than just convenience. This is about creating a foundation for a more secure and efficient system for everyone.
Okay, so safer online shopping, faster transactions, that all tracks. But some of these articles suggest tokenization could shake things up beyond online payments. They're talking about things like owning pieces of real estate, even art, using these tokens. How does that even work?
That's where things get really interesting. It's called fractional ownership, and it has the potential to democratize assets that, frankly, used to be only for the ultra-wealthy. Imagine a company buys a skyscraper. They could then divide ownership of that building into, like, thousands, even millions of tokens.
Hold on. So I could theoretically own a tiny sliver of a skyscraper. That just sounds wild.
Precisely. And because these tokens are bought and sold on a blockchain, the entire process becomes more accessible, more transparent, and way more efficient. This could really reshape how we think about investing, especially for, the average person.
And speaking of major players, even Wall Street, which seemed kind of wary of crypto at first, is warming up to this whole tokenization idea, right? Especially with BlackRock launching that tokenized mutual fund.
It's a really interesting shift. We're seeing Wall Street realize the huge potential of blockchain technology, the backbone of tokenization, to completely transform their systems.
So they're basically saying, okay, we might not love crypto, but we can't ignore how powerful this tech is.
Exactly. BlackRock's tokenized mutual fund is a prime example. By representing shares as digital tokens, they're offering faster trading, lower costs, and much greater transparency. It's a major sign that the financial world is taking tokenization very, very seriously.
Okay, so we've got MasterCard making big moves and Wall Street starting to test the waters. It's like a tokenization party. But it's not just MasterCard, is it? One of these articles mentioned Visa building something called a tokenization platform, something specifically for banks to use.
Right, and Visa's actually approaching it a bit differently. They're focusing on how traditional banks could issue their own tokens on a blockchain. So imagine, instead of just representing data, these tokens could actually represent currencies like, dollars or euros
So
or
it's like a digital version of the physical money we use every day, but living on a blockchain.
exactly. And the really exciting part is that these tokens could then be used with things like smart contracts. That opens up this whole world of possibilities within decentralized finance or, DeFi.
DeFi, right? That's another one of those terms that keeps popping up.
Yeah.
Could you maybe break that down a bit? It sounds kind of intimidating, but I get the feeling it's a pretty big deal.
You're right. It's a big deal. Imagine a financial system that doesn't need those traditional intermediaries, like banks. That's essentially what DeFi is trying to achieve. It's about building a financial system that's more open, more accessible, and it uses blockchain technology to make it happen.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
hmm
So instead of going through a bank to get a loan, DeFi lets you do that directly on a blockchain platform, maybe even using those bank-issued tokens that Visa's working on.
Precisely. It's about cutting out that middleman and making peer-to-peer financial services a reality. And tokenization is a crucial part of this. It represents assets and helps those transactions happen securely and transparently.
Wow, this really does feel like we're on the edge of a huge shift in finance. But these articles suggest tokenization goes even further. We see it popping up in things like supply chain management.
Yep.
I'm picturing way less paperwork and a lot more efficiency, right?
You're absolutely right. One article gave this great example of how companies could use tokens to track their goods, like materials, all along their journey. Imagine being able to trace, let's say, your coffee beans from the actual farm where they were harvested all the way to your local coffee shop, all through this system that's transparent and tamper-proof.
So instead of relying on stacks of paperwork and just hoping for the best, you've got it all right there on the blockchain, totally verifiable. That could be huge for industries where transparency and authenticity are really key, right?
Exactly. And because you can link these tokens to smart contracts, specific actions can be triggered automatically. Like a payment could automatically go out to a supplier as soon as a shipment gets to its destination. It just streamlines everything and really cuts down on potential disputes.
Okay, before we get totally lost in all the possibilities here, I want to circle back to real estate for a second. We talked about owning a fraction of a skyscraper, but one article really got into why tokenization is such a perfect fit for real estate in particular.
It's a really good example of how tokenization can solve some of the really, long-standing issues in a traditional market. Real estate is notoriously illiquid, which basically means it's tough to quickly turn it into cash. And it's often out of reach for people who aren't already wealthy just because properties cost so much. Tokenization totally changes that.
So how does that actually play out in the real world?
Okay, so picture this. A real estate company buys a big apartment building. Now they can take ownership of that building and split it into thousands or even millions of tokens. And then these tokens can be bought and sold on a blockchain platform, very similar to how, say, stocks are traded today.
So someone could actually buy a tiny piece of that apartment complex with, say, a few $100. That could really change who gets to invest in real estate.
Exactly. It opens up the market to a whole new group of people. And because it's all on a blockchain, those transactions happen much faster, they're more transparent, and, potentially even cheaper than traditional real estate deals.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's this one term from these articles that keeps sticking in my mind. Composability. It sounded like a bunch of tech jargon at first, but it seems like a pretty crucial concept here, especially when we're talking about real estate and DeFi working together. What's the significance of that word composability?
Composability might sound kind of complicated, but the idea itself is actually really simple. It basically means different systems being able to talk to each other, interact smoothly. And in the context of tokenization, it means that these tokens aren't just stuck within one platform or, one specific use
So
case.
it's not just about turning an asset into a token, it's about what you can then do with that token out there in the wider world within this bigger ecosystem.
Exactly. And that's where things get really, really interesting. For example, imagine using that fraction of a tokenized apartment you own as collateral for a loan, like on a DeFi platform, right? Or even further down the line, picture being able to use those same tokens to participate in these sophisticated financial tools that haven't even been invented yet.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. But this is getting pretty high level. Should everyday people really be paying attention to all of this? Or is it more like a playground for, the tech insiders and the finance giants?
That's a really good question, and it gets right to the heart of why we're even having this conversation, right? While the technology behind tokenization might seem kind of complex, especially at first glance, the potential impact of this is huge. It's relevant to everyone.
So even if I'm not planning to buy a tokenized piece of real estate tomorrow, I should still be keeping an eye on these developments.
Absolutely. Remember how MasterCard and Visa are already using tokenization to make payments more secure and more efficient? Those benefits, they impact all of us. Think about things like smoother online transactions or maybe even lower fees down the road.
It's kind of like the internet in the early days. Yeah, it seemed like a niche thing at first, but then, boom, it changed everything. How we live, how we work, how we connect with each other.
That's a great analogy. And just like with the internet, it's impossible to predict exactly how tokenization is going to unfold. But one thing's for sure, it has the power to totally change how we think about things like value, ownership, and even trust in this increasingly digital world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of tokenization, what's the one key takeaway you want listeners to walk away with today?
I think the most important thing to remember is that tokenization, it's not just a technological innovation. It's really a fundamental shift in how we interact with assets, information, with each other. in this digital age. It's definitely a complex and constantly evolving landscape, but it's one with tremendous potential for really positive change across so many industries and aspects of our
It
lives.
really feels like we're standing on the edge of something brand new. And yeah, there's still a lot of unknowns out there, but the possibilities are incredibly exciting.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this conversation and remember it as the moment we really first understood the power of tokenization to completely transform things.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all those possibilities. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of tokenization.